Useless. That one word echoed in my ears louder than the crash of the plate I'd just dropped. It wasn't just the sound of broken porcelain. It was the sound of something inside me shattering. I stood there frozen, pieces of glass glittering at my feet, while my son's wife, Lena, folded her arms and rolled her eyes. "You should have just stayed seated, Ma," she said, her tone sharp enough to cut through the silence. "You're not helping, you're just making a mess." My son, David, looked up from his phone for barely a second. "Mom, it's okay, just sit, we'll handle it," he muttered, not even noticing that my hands were trembling. That's when I realized this wasn't my home anymore. I used to believe family meant warmth. I had spent my whole life building that warmth. One meal, one gesture, one small act of love at a time. When David married Lena, I thought I had gained another daughter. She was lively, modern, and charming. I remember how she'd call me Mom back then, how she'd sit with me in the kitchen, asking for my secret curry recipe, her laughter mixing with the smell of cumin and garlic. When their baby, Noah, was born, I was the happiest grandmother alive. I'd wake up early to cook for them, wash little bibs, hum lullabies while rocking him to sleep. Lena used to thank me with soft eyes and hugs. But slowly, things changed. Her words grew shorter, her eyes colder. My presence became inconvenient. It started with little things. "Ma, I can handle dinner." "Ma, maybe it's better if Noah naps in his room." "Ma, don't worry about the cleaning. We've got it." At first, I told myself it was fine. They were young. They wanted independence. But the more I tried to step back, the more invisible I became. That afternoon, when the plate slipped from my hands and shattered across the floor, I didn't expect kindness, but I didn't expect cruelty either. The way she said useless, as if I was a burden, a leftover piece of an old life, I felt myself shrink. I picked up the pieces quietly, ignoring how my palms bled. Nobody moved to help, not even my son. That night, I packed my small suitcase. I didn't make a scene, I didn't scold or plead. I just folded my clothes, wrapped a few photographs in a towel, and left. The house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking clock. I paused by Noah's crib. He was sleeping, his tiny hand curled around the blanket I'd knitted for him. I whispered, "Goodbye, my little sunshine," and kissed his forehead. When I closed the door behind me, I didn't know if I'd ever walk back into that home again. For the first few days, I cried. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quiet tears that came and went with the wind. I kept replaying that word in my head, useless. I thought about how all my life I'd given everything I had, to my husband before he passed, to my son, to this family, and how suddenly it meant nothing. But one morning, as I stirred my tea and watched the sunlight fall on my old dining table, a thought came to me. If I was truly useless, then why was it my cooking that filled their home with warmth all those years? Why did my recipes make their guests smile? Why did my touch soothe their crying baby? That's when I decided I wouldn't confront her with anger. I would remind her of my worth in the language I knew best: love, patience, and a quiet lesson she'd never forget. I called David later that week. "Son," I said softly, "I'd like to have you and Lena over for dinner, just the three of us." He hesitated. "Mom, I don't know if—" I interrupted gently. "Please, it's just dinner, one evening." He agreed after a pause. I could hear Lena's voice faintly in the background, questioning, suspicious. I smiled. She would come. Curiosity has its own pull. I spent the next few days preparing. I cleaned my little kitchen until it sparkled. I took out my old apron, the one with faded yellow flowers. I planned the meal carefully. Lena's favorite dishes, the ones she used to request when she first married my son. butter chicken, spiced lentils, homemade bread, and the mango pudding she once said reminded her of her childhood. But this time, I didn't use my recipes. I used hers. Every spice, every step, copied exactly from the little handwritten notebook she had once left on the counter years ago, when she still wanted to learn from me. As the aroma filled my home that evening, a calm settled in my heart. This wasn't revenge, it was remembrance, a quiet proof that even those called useless can still create something beautiful. When the doorbell rang, I wiped my hands and opened the door with a smile. "Mom," David said, stepping in, his eyes warm but uncertain. Behind him, Lena hovered, her expression polite but guarded. "Come in," I said, my voice steady. "Dinner's almost ready." They sat at my small table, the one my late husband built decades ago. Noah wasn't with them. It was too late for him, Lena had said. Perhaps that was for the best. When they took their first bites, I watched their faces. David's eyes lit up. "Mom, this tastes exactly like Lena's version. How'd you—" "Wait, what do you mean?" I smiled, pouring more curry onto our plate. "Oh, my dear," I said softly, "I spent the last few weeks practicing your recipes, every single one." Her face went still. Then slowly, color rose to her cheeks, part confusion, part embarrassment. David looked between us, sensing the unspoken weight in the air. "Mom, why?" I met Lena's gaze and said gently, "Because I wanted to learn from the best. Isn't that what useless people should do?" The room fell silent. The only sound was the clock ticking on the wall and the quiet hum of shame. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The truth was sitting right there on the table, seasoned, simmered, and served with dignity. Lena didn't answer right away. She just stared at her plate, her fork trembling slightly as if it had suddenly become too heavy. The silence between us felt long, stretched thin like a thread about to break. Then she finally spoke, quietly, almost to herself. I didn't mean it like that. That day, I was just frustrated." I nodded slowly. "Frustration passes. Words don't." David reached for my hand, his eyes full of regret. "Mom, I should have stopped her. I didn't realize how much it hurt you." I smiled faintly. "You're my son, David. A mother forgives before her child even apologizes." But my voice quivered on the last word, because forgiveness, though it sounded gentle, still carried the ache of all those silent nights I'd cried alone. We finished dinner quietly after that. The room smelled of cardamom and butter, warm, nostalgic, bittersweet. Lena helped clear the dishes, her movements clumsy, unsure. At one point, our hands brushed, and she looked up. For the first time in a long while, I saw something in her eyes that wasn't irritation or pride. It was shame and something softer, maybe understanding. As they left, she turned at the doorway. "Thank you for dinner," she said quietly. "It was really good." Her tone was different this time, not polite, not forced, just real. After they drove off, I stood at the window for a long while, watching the taillights disappear into the darkness. My home was quiet again, but it didn't feel empty anymore. There was peace in that silence. Earned peace. A few days passed before I heard from them again. Then one morning, I woke to the sound of knocking. When I opened the door, Lena stood there, alone, holding a small box wrapped in brown paper. She said, "I brought you something." I invited her in. She walked hesitantly to the table where we'd eaten before, her hands fidgeting with the ribbon. She said, "I found this when I was cleaning the kitchen. It's your recipe book. You must have left it behind." I opened the box. Inside lay my old, faded notebook, pages stained with years of oil and spices. My handwriting looped and danced across the margins, full of notes from a lifetime of feeding love into every meal. I smiled. I thought this was gone. Lena's eyes softened. She said, I read some of it. I never realized how much care you put into everything, even small things, like how you write down which dish David liked the most on his birthday. Her voice broke. I was wrong, Ma. Hearing her call me that again, Ma, made my throat tighten. It wasn't just a word, it was a bridge being rebuilt one plank at a time. We poured us both tea and sat together. For a while we didn't talk, we just listened to the faint ticking of the clock, the wind brushing against the curtains. Finally she said, You know, when I called you useless, I was angry. I was tired. But mostly, I was jealous. You do everything with so much grace. You make people feel loved just by being around. And she looked down. I didn't know how to match that. I reached across the table and gently took her hand. Lena, you don't need to match me. You just need to care. That's what love is. Caring enough to see beyond your own pain. She nodded, tears glimmering in her eyes. That day we cooked together. For the first time in years, the kitchen filled with laughter again. She asked questions. I guided her, and we both learned something. She about patience, and I about letting go. When David came home later, he found us sitting on the floor, flour on our aprons, and a half-burnt loaf of bread between us. He blinked, surprised. What's going on here? Lena laughed softly. Your mother is teaching me how not to burn dinner. He smiled, that boyish grin I hadn't seen in years, and kissed my forehead. Looks like you two are finally a team. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about everything. The hurt, the silence, the quiet dinner that changed everything. I realized something. Sometimes people need to be reminded, not through anger, but through love, because love is the only lesson that leaves a permanent mark. A few weeks later, on my birthday, I returned home to find David, Lena, and little Noah waiting on my doorstep. The table was set with candles and flowers, and Lena was holding a cake that she had baked herself. When she handed me the first slice, she smiled shyly. She said, I used your recipe. I hope it's good enough. I took a bite. It was sweet, not perfect, but full of heart. It's wonderful, I whispered. And in that moment, as Noah clapped his tiny hands and everyone laughed, I felt something heal inside me. I wasn't useless. I was needed, just in a quieter, wiser way. Sometimes life doesn't need grand revenge to set things right. Just a little reminder, a taste, a touch, a lesson cooked slowly in love. Because even when the world calls you useless, the truth is simple. Love never loses its purpose. It only waits to be remembered.